they'll tell you to be kind, to be easy to work with, to smile more. But Machiavelli saw through it. He knew that behind every compliment is a calculation, and behind every demand for your kindness is someone preparing to take your place. The desire to be liked is not innocent. It is the first step toward becoming controllable. In the game of power, the moment you crave their approval is the moment you lose your edge. Because power is not given to the agreeable, it is taken by the unafraid. The first mistake is believing that being liked keeps you safe. It does not. It simply keeps you visible and vulnerable. When you begin shaping your words, your tone, your posture, even your dreams around what others might approve of, you are no longer a player. You are a mirror, a puppet, a reflection of what the room wants you to be, and no one fears a reflection. They may applaud you. They may smile. They may say you are so easy to be around. But deep down, they've already made their decision. You are not a threat. Machiavelli knew that a man obsessed with being liked would always bend when pressure came. He would negotiate under threat, retreat under criticism, and crumble under silence. Such a man cannot lead. And worse, he cannot protect himself, because when the storm comes, the agreeable are the first to be sacrificed. Not because they are hated, but because no one respects what is always accessible. In the name of harmony, you make yourself harmless. In the name of likability, you make yourself forgettable. Power does not exist in those who cater to the room. It exists in those who define it. Every time you choose to speak softer to keep the peace, every time you hide your instincts to be polite, every time you agree just to avoid tension, you are training yourself to be powerless. And the world will believe you. The room will absorb you. The people you worked so hard to please will walk past you towards someone who doesn't need their approval, because that kind of self-possession is magnetic. And in the language of power, it is irresistible. You do not build influence by softening your edges. You build it by becoming undeniable, even if that means being disliked. Because once you are willing to be disliked, you become free. You are no longer playing their game. You are playing your own, and that is where power begins. You cannot see clearly if you are constantly scanning for applause. Approval is not a reward, it is a distraction. It pulls your focus away from what must be done and places it on how you will be perceived. And when perception becomes your compass, you will wander into weakness every time. Machiavelli understood that true decision-making cannot happen in the presence of emotional need. The ruler who waits for affirmation is not ruling, he is begging. And yet this is how most people live, addicted to the nod, the smile, the signal that they are still accepted by the group. But power is not built in consensus. It is carved from solitude. When you shape your choices around others' comfort, you betray the parts of you that could have changed the game. You dilute your vision. You hesitate when boldness is required. You talk yourself out of strategy in order to maintain peace. But peace with others often means war with yourself. And eventually, the self you've buried under endless compromise begins to rot. The great lie is that approval brings stability. In truth, it only brings confusion. You start asking the wrong questions, not what is right, but what will they think? Not what moves the mission forward, but will this make them uncomfortable? You blur the line between respect and obedience, between connection and submission. And the more you do it, the more you forget what your original goal was. Clarity demands detachment. It requires the brutal discipline of not caring what they feel, not because you are cruel, but because you are focused, because you understand that a vision cannot survive the sickness of pleasing everyone it touches. The need to be liked will make you polite when you should be precise, slow when you should be sharp, apologetic when you should be ruthless. You will find yourself trying to win over the very people who are quietly working to dismantle you. This is how the world rewards the agreeable with blindfolds and knives. But when you remove the need for validation, everything sharpens. The fog lifts. The decisions that felt impossible become obvious. The tension that made you fold becomes fuel. You are no longer calculating how to keep them comfortable. You are calculating how to win. You do not need clarity and approval at the same time. You must choose. One builds empires, the other gets applause at your funeral. Machiavelli did not write for the kind-hearted. He wrote for those who understood that the world does not reward good intentions, it rewards control. And buried inside, "The prince" is a line that has outlived kings and parliaments alike. It is better to be feared than loved. Not because fear is noble, but because love is conditional. Because approval is soft, and fear holds its shape. People will love you when it suits them. They will admire you when you are useful. But fear remains even after they disagree. It does not bend in the wind. Machiavelli's brilliance was not in cruelty, it was in clarity. He saw what most rulers refuse to admit, that being loved makes you vulnerable. It ties your power to their mood. It gives them the ability to unmake you with disappointment. And if they can unmake you, you are never powerful, just tolerated. You do not control those whose approval you need. You obey them. And in every court, in every boardroom, in every home where strategy lives in silence, the one who cannot bear being disliked is the one who is already owned. Machiavelli's observation was not a command to rule through terror. It was a permission slip to stop begging, to stop softening every decision in the name of likability, to stop shaping your life around those who would turn on you the moment you no longer amuse them. There is a cold truth here. The masses do not stay loyal to kindness. They stay loyal to strength. They are drawn to stability, to certainty, to the person who does not flinch when threatened. If you are respected, they will follow you through fire. If you are merely liked, they will leave you the second it burns. This is the lesson that most never learn until it's too late, until they've been betrayed by the very people they tried to protect, until they've watched their kindness rewritten as weakness. Their warmth used to justify a knife. And when that moment comes, the cold words of Machiavelli echo louder than any apology. It is better to be feared, because fear does not lie. It does not shift with fashion. It does not crumble under gossip. It anchors you, and once you are anchored, you can move the world. There is no power where there are no boundaries, and there are no boundaries where there is a need to be liked. The person who cannot say no is not generous, they are enslaved. Machiavelli would have seen it instantly. A ruler who cannot deny others will soon be ruled by them. When you train yourself to be agreeable, you begin to tolerate small violations. A favor here, a harmless request there, a few more hours, a little more patience, one more compromise, and before long, you are no longer choosing, you are reacting, you are explaining, you are surrendering in slow, polite steps. That is how boundaries die, not in one grand betrayal, but in 1,000 quiet nods. You do not notice it at first, because the erosion is wrapped in praise. They call you understanding. They call you reliable. They call you someone who always shows up. And so you keep showing up, even when it costs you, even when it leaves you hollow, even when the things you said yes to become cages. You confuse exhaustion for purpose. You confuse compliance for connection. But inside, A resentment builds one that you are too polite to name, because naming it would require conflict, and conflict would mean risking how they see you. So you absorb it, you carry the weight of other people's comfort while your own spine begins to crack. But a boundary, once violated, teaches others what is allowed. And the more you bend, the more they believe you will never break. They stop asking, they start expecting, and expectation is where entitlement is born. Soon, the very people you tried to protect will demand what once was a favor. They will be offended by your fatigue. They will question your silence. They will act betrayed when you finally try to reclaim yourself. But the betrayal did not begin with your no. It began with all the yeses that came from fear. Machiavelli understood that peace built on surrender is not peace. It is submission dressed in diplomacy. True peace comes from limits, from clear lines, from the strength to uphold them even when your voice shakes. Because if you do not protect your space, no one else will. And if you do not draw the line, they will walk straight through you, smiling as they do it. The boundary is not a wall, it is a mirror. It shows people how you expect to be treated. And if that mirror is cracked by your own approval seeking, do not be surprised when they treat you like glass, breakable, replaceable, forgotten. Manipulators do not hunt the strong. They wait for the soft-hearted to exhaust themselves. They do not strike with force, they lean in with charm. And they are always watching for one thing, the weakness of needing to be liked. Because that need is a crack. And where there is a crack, there is an entry point. Machiavelli would have seen it as a tactical flaw, a breach in the fortress of the self. The one who cannot stomach being disliked is easy to predict, easy to guilt, easy to control. All it takes is the right tone, the right pause, the right look of disappointment, and you fold. Not because you agree, but because you want them to think you are good. But manipulators do not respect goodness. They exploit it. They study your tells. They test your thresholds. They push small boundaries to see how much you'll tolerate. And when they realize that your spine is made of apology, they make you their puppet, not with aggression, but with passive control. They say things like, "I didn't expect that from you," or "I just thought you cared." They say it with a smile, a wounded one, because they know you'll respond. You always respond. You over-explain. You reframe. You shrink. You give in. And each time, you teach them something. That guilt works better on you than truth. That pressure rewrites your priorities. That peace matters to you more than power. And once they learn that, they do not stop. They just evolve. They begin to weaponize your kindness. They turn your empathy into obligation. They disguise commands as favors and call your exhaustion selfish when you finally hesitate. And the worst part is, they make you believe it's your fault. That you changed. That you used to be easier. That your silence is the problem, not their manipulation. But the truth is simpler. They were never drawn to your light. They were drawn to your cracks, to the part of you that could not handle being the villain in someone else's story. That's what they play on your fear of being misunderstood, your fear of being alone. But Machiavelli would remind you, it is better to be feared than fooled. It is better to lose shallow approval than to be slowly drained by someone who smiles as they use you. Power begins when you stop trying to control what others think and start controlling who gets access to you. The stronger your boundary, the less appetizing you become to the manipulative. Because they do not want someone they have to fight, they want someone who will surrender without resistance. And once they know you won't, they leave. Not because you are cruel, but because you are no longer easy. Niceness is not a virtue. It is a strategy. A costume, a social camouflage worn by those who have learned that appearing harmless buys them time, tolerance, and access. But like all costumes, it can be stripped away. Machiavelli saw this clearly. People pretend to be good not because they are, but because goodness makes them useful, safe, and forgettable until they no longer want to be. The one who is always nice is not honest. They are performing, they are curating their image to stay accepted, to avoid tension, to maintain an illusion of control. And in doing so, they trade authenticity for likability. But likability is a shallow currency. It buys applause, but not loyalty, attention, but not power. True strength cannot come from an identity built to soothe the room, because when the storm comes, and it always comes, no one remembers the one who made them comfortable. They remember the one who made them feel something real. Niceness, in its hollow form, is often cowardice in disguise. It is silence where truth is needed. It is flattery instead of confrontation. It is the slow suffocation of self-respect under the weight of politeness. And worst of all, it is the mask manipulators love most. Because once you've decided to be liked at any cost, they know the price, and they're ready to make you pay it. You will give your time, your energy, your peace. You will say yes when you want to scream no. You will laugh at things that offend you. You will agree to things that gut you, and you'll call it maturity. You'll call it diplomacy. But it's just self-erasure with a smile. Niceness is not the opposite of cruelty. It is often its accomplice. It allows cruelty to move freely while the nice look away. It rewards compliance over conviction. And when things fall apart, the nice will whisper regrets but never raise their voices. Power does not respect niceness. It respects clarity, firmness, truth. Not cruelty, but conviction, even when it makes others uncomfortable, especially when it does, because discomfort is where power lives. The person who is willing to be misunderstood, disliked, even hated for their boundary or their truth, that person is free. They are not wearing a costume. They are not auditioning for approval. They are leading. And the moment you take off the costume of niceness, the world will show its teeth. But that's how you'll know you've stepped into real power. Because when they can no longer manipulate your image, they have to face your reality. And most of them won't be able to. Not because you became cruel, but because you stopped pretending to be small. Disappointment is a weapon. Not theirs, yours. The moment you become willing to disappoint people is the moment you stop being controlled by them. Most never reach this point. They live their lives under invisible leashes pulled by expectations, guilt, reputation, and the fear of being seen as selfish. But Machiavelli would not flinch. He would say what most fear to admit. Power is not maintained by meeting expectations, but by breaking them when necessary. The one who fears disappointing others becomes their servant. Every decision is filtered through a script they did not write. Every boundary is bent by someone else's comfort, and over time, that person disappears. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in polite silence. But there is another way, a colder way. You let them down, not cruelly, not carelessly, but deliberately. You say no to the invitation. You decline the request. You walk away from the role they cast you in. You let their silence hang heavy when they don't get what they wanted, and you do not explain yourself. Because power is not loud. It is still. It does not beg to be understood. And it does not apologize for protecting itself. The people you disappoint will call you changed. They will call you distant, arrogant, unkind. They will project their disapproval like a fog, hoping you will crawl back into the version of you they could use. But do not move, because behind that disappointment is a truth they won't say. They are not hurt that you changed. They are hurt that you changed without their permission. And nothing threatens control more than someone who no longer needs instructions. This is what it means to evolve. You become immune to guilt trips. You become suspicious of praise. You learn that anyone who withdraws love because you chose yourself never loved you, they loved your compliance. Letting people down is not weakness. It is a signal. It tells the world, I will not betray myself to make you comfortable. And those who truly see you, the rare few, will respect you more for it. The rest will fall away, and that, too, is power. Because every person who leaves when you disappoint them is one less chain you have to carry. Machiavelli knew this kind of solitude. The solitude of someone who is no longer afraid to be misunderstood. He understood that freedom and approval do not live in the same house. So choose. Live as their favorite and rot quietly, or become your own authority and let the world adjust to your absence. There is no peace in living as a performance. Disappoint them and walk away whole. Mutual respect is a phrase people use to make themselves feel safe, but Machiavelli would have called it what it truly is: an illusion that rarely survives conflict, because most people don't actually want mutual respect. They want quiet submission dressed as politeness. They want agreement disguised as connection. They want you to mirror their values, their tone, their rhythm, and call it mutual. But the moment you assert your own shape, your own limit, your own pace, that illusion fractures. The respect they claimed to have for you was conditional. It lived inside your silence, inside your ability to agree, to smile, to avoid the hard truths. And once that performance ends, so does their so-called respect. Machiavelli understood that power never sits equally across the table. There is always a current beneath the conversation, a pull of dominance, of influence, of subtle control. And those who truly respect you will not disappear when you refuse to bend, but most will, because their respect was not real, it was borrowed from your usefulness, your predictability, your willingness to shrink in just the right ways. It was never about you. It was about how easy you made them feel. But mutual respect is not ease. It is tension survived. It is standing your ground and watching who stays. It is being disliked and still being heard. It is not being loved for your likability, but for your clarity. If that clarity offends them, let it. If your truth threatens their comfort, let it, because real respect is not fragile. It does not shatter when you choose yourself. It does not vanish the moment you stop saying yes. The person who respects you only when you obey does not respect you, they manage you. And that management ends the moment you stop needing their approval. That's when the masks fall. That's when the power shifts. And that's when you learn who was truly in the room with you. Machiavelli would have called this the moment of truth, when the illusion ends and real dynamics emerge. Not the smile, not the handshake, not the empty promise of mutuality, but the silence after your no, the pause after your boundary. That is when power is measured. Not in volume, but in who backs away first. And when they do, when the illusion of mutual respect burns away, you must not chase it. Let the fire finish. Let the silence teach you, because once you stop mistaking agreement for respect, you become untouchable. You speak with less fear. You walk with less doubt. You stop asking whether they like you and start asking whether they earned the right to know you. That is mutual respect. Anything less is just theatre. Validation feels like comfort, but it is actually a leash. The more you seek it, the more you shrink. Because every time you need to be told you are good, worthy, Enough, you give someone else the power to decide when you are. Machiavelli would have called this a dangerous dependency. A ruler who needs applause is a ruler waiting to be overthrown. And yet this is how most people move, begging for proof of their worth in the eyes of strangers, friends, lovers, even enemies. They dress it up as connection, as feedback, as affirmation, but it's none of those things. It is a silent permission slip to be controlled. When your confidence relies on validation, it becomes conditional. It rises and falls with their reactions. Their silence becomes your anxiety. Their praise becomes your oxygen. And soon, you are not living, you are performing. You speak to be liked, not to be clear. You act to be approved, not to be authentic. And that gap between who you are and who they want you to be becomes a prison. But a beautiful prison is still a cage, and those who keep you there will call themselves supporters. They will say they believe in you as long as you remain convenient, as long as your strength doesn't eclipse theirs, as long as your truth doesn't threaten their comfort. But the second you stop dancing for their praise, they withdraw it. And that withdrawal feels like punishment unless you no longer need it. This is where power begins. When you stop chasing their reactions and start standing on your own. Machiavelli knew that the need for validation is the easiest way to control a person. Offer them a taste of approval and you can shape their loyalty. Threaten to take it away and you can shape their silence. But the one who does not need it, who does not depend on applause, likes, compliments, reassurance, that person is dangerous. Because they cannot be manipulated with attention, they do not flinch when misunderstood. They do not crumble when ignored. They are steady in the storm, and that steadiness terrifies those who rely on control. You will be called arrogant, cold, distant, but you are none of those things. You are free. You are no longer addicted to being seen the right way. You are no longer bound to their gaze. And when you no longer fear being invisible, you become impossible to ignore. The silence that once haunted you becomes your shield. The solitude that once scared you becomes your throne, because power does not live in the eyes of others. It lives in the moment you no longer care what they see. Predictability is a liability. And when your predictability is rooted in constant agreement, you become not only boring, you become expendable. Machiavelli understood that power is not maintained by being liked, but by being unreadable. If everyone knows what you'll say, how you'll react, what you'll allow, they begin to play you like a game they've already mastered. The predictably agreeable person becomes a tool, not a threat. Easy to manage, easy to manipulate, easy to replace. At first, people may praise your consistency. They'll say you're reliable, easygoing, cooperative. But underneath that praise is calculation. Because when someone always agrees, they stop being respected. No one fears the opinion that bends. No one values the voice that echoes their own. And in a world where power is often unspoken, your constant agreement becomes a silent confession. I want to belong more than I want to be clear. I want to be accepted more than I want to be strong. But real strength is unpredictable. It is not cruel or erratic. It is unreadable by design. You cannot control what you cannot predict. And if no one can predict your reaction, they will think twice before trying to manipulate it. The people pleaser, the constant yes man, the agreeable one, these are not admired. They are used. And the longer they live in this performance, the more invisible they become, until one day they wake up realizing they've built a reputation out of silence, a legacy of nodding. But power is not built with nods. It is built with pauses, with refusal, with moments where others expect obedience and are met with stillness. The strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. It is the one whose next move cannot be guessed. Predictability kills negotiation. It invites entitlement. It tells others exactly how to push, when to push, and how far they can go before you break. But when you become unpredictable, when your agreement is rare, when your yes must be earned, your presence becomes valuable. Your approval becomes a signal, not a habit. And suddenly, the room adjusts to you. This is what Machiavelli would have taught. Stop being easy to read. Stop being easy to persuade. Stop being the one who smooths every edge. You were not born to be their comfort. You were born to be a force. And forces do not move on command. They move when they decide the timing is right. So let them wonder where you stand. Let them be uncertain. Let them work for your alignment. Because when your approval is not guaranteed, your power island, a leader who begs is not a leader. They are an actor in the costume of authority, hoping the audience doesn't notice the fear behind the script. You cannot guide people while also craving their validation. You cannot direct the path if you are terrified of being left behind. Machiavelli understood this long before the modern world wrapped leadership in soft words and empty gestures. He knew the moment a ruler began asking for affection, he had already surrendered power, because true power is never requested. It is not won by applause or maintained by popularity. It is asserted quietly, relentlessly, and without apology. The need to be liked turns kings into puppets and commanders into courtiers. Every time you look over your shoulder to see if they still support you, you reveal something fatal, that your authority is dependent on their feelings. And feelings shift. The same crowd that cheered you on Monday will curse you by Thursday. Public approval is wind. It changes with weather, rumors, whispers, and fear. But strength does not move. And those who lead from strength do not ask for love. They accept loneliness. They accept misunderstanding. Because they understand the price of influence, and they are willing to pay it. But those who beg cannot lead. They adjust themselves like a weather vane. They bend their voice to match the room. They soften truth into fluff, until nothing they say can hold weight. Eventually, no one follows them out of respect. They follow out of habit, or worse, pity. And when the hard decision comes, when the sacrifice must be made, or the war must be declared, or the boundary must be enforced, the begging leader falters. They worry how it will look. They ask if everyone agrees. They wait too long, and the window closes. Machiavelli would have called it what it is, weakness wrapped in likability, and nothing invites betrayal faster. Because people do not trust those who grovel. They do not rally behind those who crave applause. They follow the one who moves forward whether or not they are clapped for. The one who speaks even if the room falls silent. That is a leader. One who leads without begging to be followed. One who walks first, alone if necessary. So if you find yourself performing for approval, ask yourself, am I still leading, or have I traded command for comfort? Because once you start asking for permission to lead, you have already lost it. There is a kind of power that does not speak, it watches. It does not chase, it observes. It does not react, it waits. Machiavelli understood that silence is not absence, and distance is not weakness. They are tools, sharp ones, and the one who learns to use them becomes untouchable. Most people live loud. They explain, defend, correct, plead, apologize, repeat. They cannot stand to be misunderstood, misjudged, or left out. So they overspeak, they overshare. They stay too close to people who drain them, too tied to roles that cage them. And in doing so, they become transparent, readable, predictable, easily manipulated. But the one who chooses silence, real silence, becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. It makes people uneasy. It makes them wonder. It forces them to fill in the gaps, to project, to question. And in that questioning, they reveal more about themselves than you ever do. Detachment is the same. When you do not rush to defend, when you do not flinch at withdrawal, when you do not collapse at rejection, you communicate strength without a single word. People cannot control what does not emotionally depend on them. And this is why silence and distance are feared, because they signal that you are no longer waiting for permission to exist. You are not seeking access, you are creating space, and space creates gravity. The more detached you become, the more people notice your absence. Not because you shouted your worth, but because you stopped placing it in their hands. Detachment is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the refusal to beg for what should have been given freely. It is the decision to stop offering explanations to those committed to misunderstanding you. And it is the discipline to let people feel your silence instead of explaining your boundary. Machiavelli would say, the moment you stop reacting is the moment you start controlling the room. Because reactions are tells. They give away your insecurities, your hopes, your fears. But detachment, it reveals nothing. And what cannot be read cannot be played. Learn to love the pause. Learn to step back. Learn to disappear without warning and reappear with precision. Let them wonder if you're watching or if you've already left. Let them feel the discomfort of your quiet, because in a world addicted to noise, the one who commands with nothing but their absence becomes a myth. And myths are remembered far longer than those who never stop talking. Burn it. Rip it out of you like rot from a dying tree. The need to be liked is not just weakness, it is decay. It is the quiet, smiling voice that convinces you to stay small, stay soft, stay silent. It tells you to say what they want to hear, to shrink so they don't feel threatened, to bleed so they stay comfortable. But Machiavelli would not have begged for anyone's favour. He would have set the room on fire and walked through the ashes without asking if anyone approved. Because power does not survive in the hearts of the agreeable. It lives in those who are willing to walk alone, to be hated, misunderstood, mocked, and not flinch. If you still need them to like you, they still own you. They can shape your tone with a look. They can silence your truth with a pause. They can derail your direction with nothing but disapproval. And you'll call it diplomacy. You'll call it grace. But it's just fear. Fear of exile. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of what happens when you stop smiling. But here is the truth most people choke on. Your need to be liked is why you are not respected. They sense it in your voice, in your eagerness, in your refusal to say no, in your carefulness, your edits, your pauses. And so they test you, they push, they demand, and you yield because you don't want to be seen as cold. You want to be the good one, the easy one, the one who understands, and in return, they forget you. Or worse, they remember you as the one who always folded, the one who always gave in. But when you burn the need to be liked, everything changes. You stop asking for permission. You stop apologizing for your presence. You stop editing yourself to fit into places that were never built for you. You speak with precision, not hope. You walk with certainty, not need. And they feel it, the silence between your words, the distance in your eyes, the power in your refusal to explain. You are no longer performing. You are no longer begging. You are no longer softening your truth to keep their affection. You are fire, not a candle flickering for attention, but a blaze that lights its own path, and in that blaze you lose nothing of value. Only the chains, only the illusions, only the parts of you that kept you begging in the name of being good. You do not need to be liked to be powerful. You need to be clear, cold, unbothered, and when you are, they will still talk. They will still judge. But they will do it from behind, because no one walks ahead of the one who leads without needing to be followed. If you've ever felt the weight of always being liked, remember this approval is a leash, and power is what happens when you cut it. If you're ready to burn the need for validation and move through the world untouchable, subscribe for more dark blue psychology. And comment below, what was the moment you realized being liked wasn't worth the cost? Let your silence become your strategy and never beg again.